Well, welcome everybody. I'm here with my good friend Brad Olsen. This is part of the Giza Direct ongoing series, and Brad and I decided to get on and have a little bit of a cross interview, talking about our experiences with the world, his amazing experiences around the world, and even Antarctica, and my new book that I just came out with, The Lore and Legends of Dropa, which explains a little bit of my history growing up in South Asia and Nepal, as well as my thesis study dealing with ancient Buddhist cultural mysticism, the connections to Sirius, the Mount Meru experience, 4 gifts from Sirius, as well as the 3 ascended masters of Sirius. And so I'm really excited to be on here with you, Brad. Thanks a lot for doing this. And yeah, let's dive in.
Hey, Hans, thanks for having me on. Yeah, looking forward to this talk with you. We got a lot in common. We've traveled the world quite extensively. Boy, I didn't realize you grew up in Asia too. That's pretty cool. That's kind of what I was dreaming of when I was a little kid growing up in the suburbs of Chicago, where I thought it couldn't get any more boring than this. So anytime I have friends who had really cool, exciting childhoods, I'm like, I almost had one, but I had a great adulthood. And after I finished college, I self-financed and first did a trip to Europe, then a trip around the world, taught English in Japan, made money along the way. And that really started my publishing career, and with the book World Stompers right there, a global
awesome.
travel manifesto that Oliver Stone endorsed as a subversive masterpiece of travel writing. So that got me in the biz, and I did travel books for about 15 years till the .com era, when
Everything
people could just
changed.
get online and research any trip. So it really tanked the travel book business. So I had an existential crisis, you could say, and asked myself, what do I really want to get into? What do I want to write about? What do I want to explore? And it's always been UFOs, phenomenon, paranormal hotspots, and how those relate to places around the world. Then when I got into the esoteric series, all the esoteric traditions, which I've been utterly fascinated with, and spent 6 months in Nepal and India, and being turned on to all these incredible human abilities that the gurus and the sadhu of India have supposedly attained. So I've just been fascinated with this whole subject, and I know you have too. So that's why I think this will be a really good talk.
Yeah, I agree. I've been all over South Asia. I grew up, as I was saying, in Kathmandu, Nepal. I lived there literally since I was 4 years old until I graduated from high school at the international school there. And I was fortunate enough to grow up with 72 different nationalities in the school of about 300 students. And we traveled all over the place doing sports, art, drama, cultural exchanges. I've been all over Pakistan. I've been all over India. I've been to Sri Lanka, Bangladesh, Burma, now Myanmar. I've been into Ladakh. I've been into Kashmir. And so
nice.
There, it was, I didn't really have this kind of a aspect or a knowledge of what I wanted to get into until much later in life, when I started realizing, oh my God, I've been to all these amazing places. I've just never really put forth any of my experiences with them. And so I started finding other like-minded people. I interestingly grew up with Graham Hancock's wife, Santa. Her children went to school with me.
Oh, wow.
At Lincoln International School in Kathmandu. They were a couple of years below me, but yeah, no, before I even knew that they were a thing. And I'd read his book, not Chariots of the Gods, sorry. I had read his
Fingerprints of the Gods.
Fingerprints of the Gods, exactly, in high school. And so it started all coming together. And recently our friend Johnny Enoch kind of brought me into this whole field by giving me a challenge of, hey, I know you did your thesis around, ancient Buddhist mysticism and the serious connection to Buddhism, but what are your thoughts on the Dropa? And, I set out to kind of debunk the story in a weird way, but the more I dove into it, I realized that a lot of the research on this topic and this story had really just been surface level. And so I started using what I knew and connecting the dots, and got into a lot of it, and was really incredibly fascinated with the stuff that I found. And then, this year I met you at Conscious Life Expo. We also reconnected at Contact in the Desert, which was awesome. But I just started listening to your lectures and whatnot, and I was very fascinated with some of the stuff that you've done as well, and didn't realize you had this whole publishing experience behind you as well. That's really amazing. So, wow.
Yeah, I can't complain. But would you explain a little bit about the Dorpa and what that is and how you put it together in your book?
So I did my thesis study in 1998 in Bhutan. My father was working there. As you probably know, Bhutan is a very difficult country to gain access to.
It
In
is.
98, they allowed about 2,000 tourists a year. It was $300
Mhm.
to $600 a day for your visa. And they would only allow you to go to Boomtong, which is like a 12-hour drive from Paro. And treacherously 12-hour drive. The roads are super windy and like steep inclines, and you go over a couple passes, but they don't really let you go and see a lot of ancient Buddhism. And Bhutan is one of these countries that has probably some of the oldest monasteries and some of the oldest artwork relating around Buddhism still intact in the world. And so my fascination was this. I mean, I'm a graphic designer by nature. My background originally was illustration, and I was very fascinated with Buddhist illustration and Buddhist art. I have a lot of it in my house and have been very excited, about some of the pieces that I've attained. And so I wanted to learn more about, what are these thangkas and what are these, wall paintings all about? And so
Oh, okay.
I was granted 2 months intensive study during the summer, which in Bhutan is incredibly hot. But I was
Hot.
yeah, incredibly hot. I mean, it's incredibly humid. You're in the middle of the monsoon there. And I gained access to some of these really remote lakongs and zongs, which are the monasteries, and started learning about different aspects of Buddhist cultural mysticism. And all this started connecting with Sirius. And while I was there, where my father lived, which is interesting, right across the street from the front entrance of where his flat was, is the Sakteng wildlife preserve for the Magoo. And the Magoo or the Magao or Magai, whatever, are considered the local Yeti of the region. And so I thought this was interesting that
Oh, wow.
they have a wildlife preserve for the Yeti, the Magoo, right? And so also in this area of far eastern Bhutan is where this nomadic tribe of Dropa come through. And I didn't really consider who they were or what they're about. They're depicted in a couple of the Tonka paintings on the walls in the lakongs and the zongs, primarily dealing with the pronunciation of the first Druk Gyalpo, which is the cloud dragon king of Bhutan. And there's this depiction of this tiny man in stature. He's wearing a leather, inverted leather vest, and he has this spider cap, which they're very notorious for wearing. They're like felted wool, and they have these talons that stick out that kind of wicks moisture away from their face in a high altitude passes. And he's carrying a bowl, and it's one of these Tibetan singing bowls. And in the bowl is the Sintamani stone. And so it's interesting that in my studies, I'm learning about these 4 gifts from Sirius that by legend came down from Sirius 20,000 years ago. And 2 of them are the singing bowl and the Sintamani stone. And I started asking the guy that was translating for me, who are these? Who is the Dropa? Who is the Drokpa? Who are these people? And he said they're very enigmatic. They're nomadic. They come out of far eastern Kham Tibet, and their name changes across the region. And so in far eastern Kham Tibet, they're called the Dropa. In central Tibet, they're called the Zopa. When you get into Bhutan, they're called the Drokpa, which means people of the cloud dragon. And then that goes through Nepal and northern India, and then they end up in Ladakh, traveling through Ladakh, Pakistan, Afghanistan, Turkmenistan, up into the Black Sea region, where they've influenced some of the culture there, and they're known as the Brokpa. And it's the same nomadic group, and they're short in stature. They're all about 4 feet tall. Unlike most Tibetans and Nepalese, they have a very orangish yellow skin, and they have really intense blue eyes, which is totally, you don't see blue-eyed Tibetans, you don't see blue-eyed Nepalese. This is very rare to this region. And they don't speak, well, they do speak Chinese, Tibetan, and Nepalese, but that's not their native tongue. They speak a language called Shinai, and a sub-language of this is called Brokat, Brokskot, or Minoriscot. And it predates Sanskrit, the mother language of this region, by 4,000 years. And so the question is,
Wow.
Who are these people? And in 1998, I didn't really even consider it. I hung out and I chatted with, the people around me about them. And then in 2004, I watched a documentary on the History Channel called The UFO Files with UFO researchers Richard Dolan, David Sereda, and Hartwig Hausdorff, who wrote the Chinese Roswell, and they started talking about this culture called the Dropa. And the way they're describing them reminded me so much of these people that I met in Bhutan, that I started, after being challenged to look into this, I went back and started looking into this and realized that the story being told had very little research put into it. And a lot of the people revolving around it were very skeptic of the story. But then if they had done a little bit more research, it would have been fascinating for them to discover that there's a lot of transliteration going on with the story, because it's coming out of China, it's being translated into German, it's being translated into Russian, it's being translated into French, and then into English. I mean, what could go wrong? All these languages, right, as you know, they're very different. They have very different how they're spoken. They have very different context. And so I started looking at the names and the people and things associated with this story and realized, wow, these names are all changing across the region. And in the original story, I mean, I could get into the original story, obviously. It comes out of the 1960s, out of Sputnik magazine is primarily where a lot of it came from in 1967. But I found a source prior to that in a magazine or a publication called UFO Nachrichten out of Germany, which stands for the UFO Bulletin or UFO News. Sorry, go on. Yep.
No, let me ask you this. You said they're about 4 feet tall.
Yes.
It kind of seems like they could be gray aliens or some kind of smaller in stature.
This is
ETs or just a dwarf community. What's your take? What do you think they are?
This is kind of the idea around it. And when you get into the different stories about it, they originated out of Sirius. Well, if we look at Sirius, it's a binary and possibly a trinary star system. And their sun and the gravitation of their sun is a lot different than ours. And so the short in stature comes from the gravitational rotation possibly around Sirius. And so when they arrive in our atmosphere, everything is very different. The gravity here is super different compared to where they are and where their homeworld is from. And so for us, for them, they're giants, but, for us, they're very short in stature. And the way they're described in the original story, they were found in a cave in this very remote region of Kham, Tibet, the remains of them, and they're described as being about 3.5 to 4 feet tall, slightly elongated skulls. Some of the bodies are skeletal, some of the bodies are mummified. They have this very, thick orangish skin and the remnants of blue eyes, as I said, which is very rare for the region. And so the blue eyes, the tonation of the skin, the size of stature is very, very similar to this group of nomads coming out of this exact same region, ending up in Bhutan.
Interesting. So do you have any idea of what kind of beings they might be?
I'm imagining sorry, what was that?
Just best educated guess what they could be.
I don't know. I'm imagining, because of the 2 or 3 stories that are out there, a lot of them are now hybrids and have intermingled and interbred with the local Kham Tibetan.
Good point.
In the storyline, it says there's 2 stories. The one in the German magazine that came out first says that they had to interbreed with the local Kham to survive and pass on their genealogy. Sputnik, the transliteration is a little bit different, and it says that they interbred with the Ham, but there is no cultural group in China called the Ham. And so I'm thinking the Ham and the Kham are a transliteration element of this word, because the phonetics of the 2 sound the same. For those of you listening, transliteration is literally when you take the sounds of one language and you transcribe them into another language so that you're depicting what you hear. And there's a lot that could go wrong with that. So Dropa, Zopa, Drokpa, Brokpa, these are all similar in sound, versus Ham and Kham, same thing. And so, yeah, to me, it was incredibly fascinating that we have this story coming out of this region that kind of dovetails with a little bit of what I was doing in Bhutan. Anyway.
Beautiful. Yeah, I got close to Bhutan. I got to the Sikkim region of India.
Yeah.
Climbed little bit ways in the steamy jungle up the third tallest mountain there, Kachenjunga.
Wow,
Got a
really?
leech on my foot.
Only
Didn't find
one?
out about that till I was taking my shoes off at the end and had to salt it and burn it off. That was kind of painful.
Yeah, leeches are
First
crazy.
time in my life I ever got a leech. But
What
yeah,
what what
it's
time of
pretty
year
wild
were
country
you?
out there.
What time of year were you there?
It would have been after I was trekking in Nepal, so in the fall,
Yeah,
February or November.
after monsoon. Interesting.
Yeah, right before.
What
Yeah,
year was what
I'd
year was
say in
this?
'93.
Oh wow. Oh wow. Okay. Interesting.
Yeah,
Long time
so
ago.
30 years ago. Wow,
most
time
most of that
flies.
area now has roads going up to the top of mountains.
Wow.
Yeah, I've been blown away with a lot of what's gone on in Nepal recently. They've I used to trek up through Manung and up and over the Torongla Pass into um uh what is the other side? Jomsom Valley is on the other side, and so you go through Muktinat,
Oh yeah.
and the whole Manung Valley now is a road all the way almost up to the pass. And
Wow.
oh my God, are you
I
kidding?
think Mustang Valley is still pretty isolated. They're not
Yes,
allowing the road to go up there.
yeah, that's all out in Dong, like far western Nepal, and that area is still very remote. They don't allow a lot up there, but a lot of the other areas are very heavily roaded now, which is it's kind of sad. It changes a lot of the tourist and trekking aspect, because in the old days you know get off the bus and spend 10 days trekking through these amazing villages and staying in these tiny hostels, but now these hostels are vacant because you can just drive half the way in a day.
Wow. Yeah.
What took you
That
into
takes the
Nepal?
adventure out of it.
What what
I
what
love Nepal.
what took you
Well,
there?
first I was going overland and I was in Varanasi, India with this British guy named Paul. And we were just traveling together, get a room across the hall from each other. And just, it's kind of good to have a travel companion,
It
look
is.
after someone. And it turned out he got really sick. And then probably the same day I got really sick. So we got hung up in Varanasi for a few days and it was only getting worse. And I said, we got to get out of here. This is not helping. And he agreed. So we got ourselves on a bus to Kathmandu. And here I am, 6'7", real tall guy, and having to squeeze into these tiny person buses. Boy, was that the ride from hell. Rickety, loud, blaring music. Stop at every town, and it's chai, chai, chai. They try to sell you stuff. And all we needed to do is just get to Kathmandu and get a room, which finally did. But that threw my game off because then it was another week in Kathmandu. It was cool to explore around the valley a bit, but I wanted to do the Nepal circuit
Like
trek.
the Annapurna circuit or the Khumbu
Annapurna circuit.
yeah.
Yeah. But so since we wasted a week in Nepal, and then finally I just had to tell the guy, this guy Paul, I said, I'm leaving. I'm going to Pokhara on a bus, and then the next day I'm just going to start trekking. And I did, and he needed to stay behind. We eventually did meet up on the trail again. He said, and the same with me, as soon as he started walking and right out of Pokhara, you can just hit upstairs.
Literally, yeah.
Yeah, and it was just sweating it out. Finally got rid of that thing, but boy, I lost some weight on that trip in a good way. I like hitting the wall physically sometimes, or even cutting down on food, or even fasting, intermittent fasting. I think it's good for the body to do that, to challenge it physically too. So instead of having the 3 weeks necessary to do the Annapurna circuit, I did the Annapurna sanctuary and made it up to the Annapurna base camp.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Right. So you went up through Tatopani, the hot springs, and
then on the way back, I looped around and caught the rest of the circuit trail and caught Tatopani,
nice.
and that was already quite developed and touristy. I can't imagine what it looks like now.
It's been washed out since '93, probably 6 times since then.
Ooh,
yeah,
no kidding.
They've had to rebuild it and find where the hot springs are, because that whole valley washes out almost every year with the monsoon. Yeah.
Oh wow, I didn't realize that.
When I was growing up, God, my dad would read Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit, and that whole trail, you're like going through Mirkwood Forest.
Well, that's where he was inspired.
Oh, I can imagine.
J.R.R. Tolkien.
So amazing. Yeah.
Lived up there. Yeah.
So
he
amazing.
was totally inspired by the little houses. I have a old website with my first book, World Stomper. It's just called stompers.com.
Oh, wow.
It's still up. You can go to that site, and there's a picture of me in Nepal with my arm on the top of a roof. And
oh yeah, you're 6'7".
The entrance was about my belly button. Yeah, I mean it's totally the land of the Lilliputians.
They're all 5 foot tall. Yeah, exactly.
Oh, if even, but man, they're strong as heck. They carry up all the porter
and
stuff up the trails.
This is something that comes interesting. You say that comes out of one of the Dropa stories. So in the book Sun Gods in Exile, a lot of the skeptics talk about two elements of this character, Carl Robin Evans, going up into the Himalayas into Tibet, and he's passed on the trail by a short man carrying about 6 times his weight that just leaves him in the dust. And the skeptics are like, there's nobody that can do this. But man, the Sherpa porters, these guys will carry refrigerators on their back full of Coca-Cola and beer to the highest villages, and they're passing tourists on the trail that are just winded. And people don't understand that they have a DNA, element in their DNA that allows them to acclimatize. And as you said, they're built like oxes. I mean, it's unbelievable. These little scrawny guys are just huffing this stuff up the mountain. It's like, how do you do this?
and steep trails and slides and through creeks, and they're wearing flip-flops. That's what blew me away.
Smoking usually.
Do that? Like, and smoking the Westerners on the trail, even guys who think they're pretty fit. Those porters will go right by them, the Sherpas. But they grew up, and they're so physiologically they have changed.
Yes,
because living at that high elevation and in their culture, always having to do this kind of portering of goods labor, up and down the valley. Yeah, their bodies are just attuned to high altitude and this kind of physical effort. And didn't you notice the higher you get in Nepal, especially on the sanctuary trail, but I know it's the true on the back end of the circuit too, where you have to cross over. I think it's like 19,000 foot pass.
Tornlaw,
it's like experienced hikers will drop from altitude sickness.
Oh, big time!
It's really high. Yeah. I think Annapurna Base Camp, which I got to, is in about 17.5 or maybe even up to 18, because the mountains there were 22 and 23. They were the 7th and 8th tallest in the world,
and they've never been climbed.
An incredible place.
They've never been climbed. There's been attempts, but the villagers will push the climbers off the trail because they're considered sacred mountains. And it's weird because you'll have all these pilgrims coming up from India. They go up to Muktinath, which if you continue up the valley, you go into Jomsom, and then up even further to Muktinath, which is right before you go over Tornlaw into the Manang Valley. And at Muktinath, they have the 108 spigots. And so you're up there in freezing cold. And these Hindus will strip down to their cloth, and they will walk through all 108 spigots in the freezing cold. And you're like, how are you doing this? I mean, it's a mastery of, the Tibetans would call this the inner fire. And this was another aspect in the story of Sun Gods in Exile is, Carl Robin Evans, he meets this monk meditating in the high altitude glaciers naked and for hours. And he's like, how is this even possible? And the skeptics are like, yeah, humans can't do this. And it's like, I was listening to one of your lectures about Captain Cook. And so he went down around, the southern coast of Australia to Tasmania. And Tasmania is considered a subarctic zone. And here you have these, these naked Tasmanians who are cannibals, and they don't even have fire. And it's like, how are they surviving? Well, they've mastered this inner fire, and bring forth Wim Hof, the Iceman. I mean, Wim Hof has some amazing things. It's like really amazing what he's been able to do with his own meditation and technique. And so it kind of puts to rest some of the skeptics that are like, this can't be possible. And it's like, it is.
Mind over matter.
Mind over matter, yeah. So speaking of subarctic areas, so you've been to Antarctica, once or several times now, I think.
Just one time.
Just once, okay.
There it is above me.
Yeah, amazing.
Yeah, about 5 years ago, four and a
Okay.
half years ago, I went down there.
I
It's
thought,
still middle of winter right now. Not a good time to go, but in November it opens up. And I went down there in January, February 2019, the
wow.
year of COVID-19. Little did we know. Good thing we did that trip because the whole tourism industry closed down for a couple of years, starting at the end of that year.
Afterward, yeah.
So they didn't sail our boat down there till last year, made it a trip again. And I saw on Facebook they're going down again this year on a sailboat, which was really exciting because there was some big waves going through the Drake Passage to get down there. And I got violently ill with seasickness. And there's another trip. I think I lost 25 pounds
Wow.
because I was just throwing up for days straight and couldn't hold anything down. It was a rough ride, but made it. And boy, the barrier of entry to get there, it was worth it because it's a landscape like nowhere else on planet Earth.
Right.
It's just a totally frozen continent with just little patches of brown or black rocks poking through. No trees, no bushes, nothing really green. There are a couple places where there's some lichen or mosses, but really it's just 99% covered with ice. So very dramatic
And
glaciers coming
thick ice.
down. Yeah.
Yeah.
And sometimes calving, breaking off. And that was really interesting because you see it and a big puff of snow comes off of it as a piece of glacier is falling into a bay. You see it first, and then you hear it, boom, and then you see the waves rushing out of the bay. And we had to right our boat to go directly into the waves. Yeah,
Wow.
you could get swamped
And
if
you're in a
you get
sailboat,
caught
which
off
is
guard.
smaller. You went with was it a Norwegian or Polish crew? I forgot. I didn't.
Polish crew, yeah,
Polish, yeah. Wow.
11 Poles and 3 Americans,
Oh wow.
and it took 92 hours to get down there, just under 4 days. We
From
dropped anchor at
Argentina.
a Polish base and then went ashore there with some fresh food and vegetables for the crew. They were very grateful for that, and they let us take showers, have dinner with them, and then we had drinks and we're playing music and stuff. About 30 of us, almost all of them were from Poland, and they're playing all their folk songs on guitars, and they brought out ice from the glacier. It was blue in color,
Wow.
and the blue ice is really old ice. You see it all over the place. There's these videos about sky ice. I don't know anything about that, where it's colder than even dry ice, but the blue ice is just really condensed ice. So they brought it around and were giving us mixed drinks with this blue ice. And as soon as they poured in the liquid in the mixer, it started popping like popcorn.
Really?
I'd never seen anything like that. It was so cool. So then later on the trip, we'd get out on the dinghy with our ice picks and go right up to a glacier wall on a bay and ting, 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 and break off some blue ice so we could have some cocktails. So there was a lot of up moments like that that were really unforgettable trip, but
That's
very, very hard travel to do
I
it by sailboat like I did it.
I can imagine. Yeah, usually there's like cruise ships that go, and like Bhutan, it's very limited where you can go.
Right.
Did you
But there was really no limitations, not that we were being followed or anything.
it's
The
just a
limitation
massively
was how much
huge,
supply and fuel.
yeah. It's
Yeah.
a huge
How
continent.
long you can
Yeah.
take it.
People don't realize how big it is, so it's like holy
Oh,
smokes.
it's huge. It's the fifth largest continent in the world.
That's wow. I would love to go down there. As I was saying before this, I had a friend that worked down there a couple times. I don't remember which base he was working at, but he was doing scientific studies, and he told me of some crazy anomalies, and like the southern borealis was just amazingly beautiful. And we're getting into ancient cultures that live down there, and the Germans were down there forever. And he had mentioned that there was a U-boat that popped up under the ice, derelict, had been frozen there. And so that
Wow.
was one of his most interesting experiences being there, was seeing that happen.
Does he remember what part
I
of
don't
Antarctica
remember.
he was
This
in?
was God, this was probably this is when I had come back in 96, 97. I had met up with him. I one of my friends I went to school with in Nepal. His father was a huge he worked at USAID. I don't remember much more of the story, but he was telling me these crazy things about, just Antarctica in general. And it's like, oh man, I would love to see it. It'd be really interesting to fly over it and see its vastness.
Right.
It'd be interesting to check out like Vostok, and obviously it's under the ice, but love to see what kind of information and research they brought up from that. So, wow,
Yeah, so much going on down there. That's what makes it so fascinating.
So you left from Argentina. Usually, a lot of people do. That's like the closest region to get there.
Right. Yeah. For boat traffic, everybody leaves from a city called Ushuaia,
Okay.
which is also the southernmost city in the world.
Oh wow.
Light traffic leaves from Punta Serenas, Chile, which is about 75 miles away across the Magellan Strait. So you have to go in and out of customs to or from Punta Serenas, but it's really beautiful down there. All the landscape, that southern tip of South America, including Terra del Fuego and Patagonia, just unbelievable scenery. That's why
I would love to see that region.
So that's why company called Patagonia, its founder was just inspired by the beauty. And
how did you
sportswear.
How did
actually
you find,
died down too?
How did you find the tour that you were on? How did you hook up with
So
that?
we just got down there. It was my girlfriend at the time, and we were just inquiring, maybe getting on a cruise ship. But we'd have to wait for over a month and didn't really want to do that. And then one travel agent just said, you just go down to the yacht harbor. It's a different pier altogether in Ushuaia. Just walk out there and just ask around who's going to Antarctica, any room? And we did with one captain. He said he'd have room for one, but we wanted to go two. And then he recommended another boat, and sure enough, they could take us. And there was also one other American that was met someone while he was traveling, and we're all still friends. And Polish guys I haven't seen since the trip, but we're all friends on Facebook. And the other two Americans, I see them all the time.
That's awesome.
Quite a journey together.
So being in South America, have you been into like Peru or Bolivia, any of this area, Ecuador?
Yeah, well, that's where the trip started.
Okay.
So first started in November of 2018. And with my girlfriend at the time, Emily Infinity, I bought a big Ford Excursion, and it was already outfitted for car camping. So that was perfect. Wow. Got that in Santiago, Chile. And a week later, I'm driving up the coast, and we had to go meet with a big tour group with Nassim Harriman and Robert Grant. And
that would have been, that was 2019. Was on that trip. Right. Yeah, he did. Yeah. There with Brian Forrester and all them. Yeah.
It was fantastic. And I got to be one of the guest speakers too. And there too, we're all really good friends. We see each other at conferences. There was 5 or 6 of us just now at Contact in the Desert from that trip. And so that's when we traveled around and did all the megaliths. And the Sacred Valley of Peru has more megaliths per capita than any other place in the world. You're just going up the road, say, to Sacsayhuaman, and there's this incredible structure of megalithic blocks. And wow, we could go check that out. And that's just a minor one compared to the great big ones that just blow you away when you see them.
Did you go into the cave beneath Sacsayhuaman? There's like a cave that's all out of the, I don't know, that place.
Anyway, Brian Forrester took us in there.
That whole valley blew my mind. Yeah.
You've been there too, right?
Yeah, I went with Brian in 2014. I met Brian. Nice. I met Brian in Hawaii when I lived on Maui. And eventually he moved to Peru, and he was like, Hans, I need you to do book covers. So this is kind of how I got into all of this, was cool. Designing all Brian's book covers and his posters. And he's like, you have to come to Peru. And I'm like, man, I can't afford this. And he's like, we'll figure it out. And I ended up going,
book cover for me.
Oh, well, yeah, for sure. Totally. Yeah, no worries. And I went down there, and in 2014, it was around my birthday in September, and I was blown away. I mean, I approached these topics, like I said, with my BS meter in the red and 100 questions. I've seen all this stuff on Ancient Aliens, whatever. But when you actually go to the sites, it's very different, and you're overwhelmed by what you're actually seeing there. And Peru blew my
Oh yeah.
mind because it's like my BS meter was completely shattered and I had thousands of questions. I'm like, what am I looking at here? And Brian took us to some very unique sites. He took us to this place called Napa Iglesia, or Napa Huaca. It's between Ollantaytambo and Machu Picchu. You're traveling down a road, and then all of a sudden, the Jeep stops and you climb 1,000 feet up this rugged, ripped out trail to this cave, and the cave is like completely hewn out of the bedrock. And then there's a temple structure in the middle of the cave, and you're like, who is building this, and who's cutting this, and how are they cutting this? I mean, we're in the middle of nowhere. How is this even possible? And it's got all these inlay, like false doors. I don't know if he took you up there or not, but that place really was one of the most mind-boggling spots. Even Ollantaytambo was probably my favorite spot in Peru, because you're up
Yeah,
at
it was amazing too.
you're up at the
Yeah.
the Temple of the Sun, and you're looking at these 100-ton, I think the biggest one up there is 80 tons, but it's like these blocks. You're like, how are these even brought up here? And Brian will sit there and go, what's even more fascinating is they came from the mountain across the river.
That's right. Yeah, and over the river and up another steep hillside.
Like, how in the hell did they do this? And then I was the
Said
guy that
to our group. He
Sorry,
said
what?
that Ollantaytambo was the oldest inhabited town in the world.
Oh, it
And I
wouldn't
took a
surprise
photo
me.
collection of all the more modern Spanish houses built on top of megalithic foundations
Yeah.
all over towns like that. It's really a fascinating place. You're right.
Pisac is also like that, but Ollantaytambo really blew my mind. And I don't know if you made it up. If you go further up, like the valley away from the main temple structure, there's all the ropes. I was the guy that jumped over the ropes, and Brian was ripping his hair out. Please don't, the guards are coming. And I would climb up all the edifices and take photos of stuff. And there's like crazy hash marks in the ground of where they remove material. And there's one spot that I climbed up to where it's like, it looks like a bed mattress that they pulled out of the rock wall, and it was just sitting there. And you measure it, and you measure the rock wall, and there's like a millimeter on both sides of it and the back side of it. And you've just got to stop and go, okay, how did they cut this out of the wall? How do you cut the back side of this slab? Mind blowing. It really didn't make a lot of sense to me. In your travels, have you gone into any like vast, amazing tunnel systems anywhere? Have you gone down into the underground?
Sure. Yeah. I love cave exploring. Done a bunch around Mount Shasta. There's quite a few
Okay.
lava tubes there you can go in. Was in Mammoth Cave, the largest cave in North America when I was a kid. My dad and I would take trips down there. We really liked it. And really fascinated with the cave system that is purported within South America underneath the Andes.
That's
And
yeah.
I'll tell you, the other American on my Antarctica trip goes by the name of Luke Dog. He was coming through Bolivia, and he was in a town called Ororu. I went through there too, but wish I had known about it. But he said he just happened to be in a guest house and was talking with some people who knew some locals, or a local guide who came in and said, hey, you want me to show you the tunnel system? We can drive up there tomorrow. And Luke got on that trip, and he said there was about a dozen or so that were known in the area, because it's a big mining town too. Those have all been plugged up. The one they went to, you just walk right in, and there were carved steps all the way down. And I kept saying, well, didn't you go down? Did you go down? He said the people in his group chickened out. He wanted to go, but then the guide couldn't really like split the group. So we only got in there maybe 100 yards or so. But
Wow.
the guide said you keep going. Of course, you need good lights and an idea where to go, and maybe even a little string behind.
I was about to say some strings, so you know how to
get
get
down
out.
to a big room. You get to a chamber, and then
Yeah.
there's other passages that go in different directions. So first-hand experience through Luke Dog of getting down there into this cave system, which David Hatcher Childress and others who have done books on South America said that, yeah, the cave system is about as expansive through the Andes as the Inca road was on top of the surface for distance and complexity and how they built it.
Interesting. Yeah, obviously Peru blew my mind, and with a lot of the cave systems there. And man, we paid good money to go to Machu Picchu, and it started raining, as Brian always says it does. And so everybody went back to the little local Pasal to drink their Cusqueños and their Pisco sours, waiting for the bus. I'm like, man, I spent good money to be here. And so I wandered the entire site, and then I wandered up the old Inca road toward the Inca Bridge. And that was one of the scariest trails I've ever been on in my life. Cause I mean, you're looking at, 2,000-foot drop offs on one side, and it's just pouring rain. And the guard at the post, he ended up following me because they've had a lot of tourists that have died up there. But I got down to the Inca Bridge,
wow.
really amazing space. And you see where they've hammered, I don't know how they did this, they hammered into the wall these wood plankings that then go up and over the hill. And this is the old Inca road, and people were running this. It's like, how are they running this?
Wow.
Runners with their whatever the beaded system that they were using, the knotted system. And so that blew me away. I was super fascinated with that. But I mean, all over Nepal, all over South Asia, there's massive cave systems. You were talking about Pokhara underneath Thewatal, the lake. There's a huge cave system under that. Called
wow.
Shiva's cave, and it ends up where Devi's Falls, where the lake drains out. And so they're always afraid of tourists going up into that. There's a Shiva temple under there. And if you keep going, you end up underneath Davies Falls, and you're looking up where the falls come through. And every once in a while, the lake floods and they have to open the dam. And they don't want people being down there because, I mean, you're kind of dead. if that's the scenario. Have you been to Egypt? Have you seen what's under Giza?
Oh yeah.
Okay, yeah.
You cannot go down there, and you can't climb the Great Pyramid either. But I managed to pull that off.
Really? Well, don't tell anybody that.
A useful indiscretion. Yeah, it's trespassing. I could have gotten in a lot of trouble, but got away with it. Had a really amazing experience up there.
Did you go into the subterranean? Did you go into the subterranean passage?
No. And only after that, I found out through Andrew Collins about the Bird Temple.
Oh yeah, wow,
which is now off. But he had videos walking right in. Just you see him on the Giza Plateau, looking around, going into this temple, and it's just not even really a false door, but it's the illusion of a wall and some kind of backstop. But if you just go back past the backstop, you can get in. And then he's still rolling his camera, and he's just going as far and as deep as you can go. It looked more like a cave system than a carved man-made tunneling system. But there were points where he was going up steps and stuff. So it had been fashioned and used for this kind of traffic. You ever seen those videos he did?
He did a lecture on my 2018 tour with him and Hugh Newman about that, which was fascinating. And I've been to Egypt twice. My favorite spot on the Great Pyramid is the subterranean passage. If you've ever been down there, it's like you go down there and there's a well shaft underneath it that keeps going down and goes into other tunnels, but that's never ever talked about. It's like, where do those tunnels go? And then you climb down the dead end shaft, which is literally, it's not very large, and you're scraping your knees up because it's just solid bedrock. And you get to the end of the dead end shaft, and it's not dead end. It's been cemented over, and there's a drill hole through it. And so it's like, where does this go? And I think it ends up somewhere around the Osiris shaft, which in 2018 we were actually allowed to go down into. And that really blew my mind. Yusuf Iwan went down. I was down there with him and Andrew and Hugh and all them. I was kind of actually the first person down there. And it was so freaky going down that ladder. Oh my God, you're going down, 3 stories on a ladder and into pitch darkness. And then they flip on the lights because the light switch is down below, and you're like shaking on the ladder going, oh, shit, where? I don't know how deep this goes. And there's 2 ladders. The other one's even more rickety. And so you get down into the main section, and there's like 6 or 8 alcoves, and there's a box that's covered with creosote. Nobody could figure out what's on it. I'm like, this is creosote. This reminds me of Nepal. In the villages, when they burn a lot of the wood, it creates this resin on everything. And then we went down into the ultimate final chamber, and Yusuf went down into the water. He's like drinking the water and standing on top of the can't remember the type of stone. It's a green stone that comes out of Lebanon, which is interesting how it even got down there, because it doesn't fit down
Wow.
any of the tunnels that go down there. It's bigger than the tunnels, but it's sitting there in the middle of this room. The water table has now covered it, but if you go past it, there's a tunnel that goes off to the right. And so the question is, where does that go? And I mean, you look at the Giza Plateau, and they have at least 10 layers of tunnels the size of semi-truck cars, or semi-truck bedding, whatever, that go 18 kilometers into the Western Desert. After the cataclysm, the Western Desert was called the Ur Nile, because the Mediterranean had flowed up and over into the desert and created this huge, vast water system. And they were pumping water through all these sites all the way to Giza. And it's like, who built all this? How was this even built? I mean, it's super mind-boggling.
Yeah, I agree. Quite.
What is the most amazing site you've ever been to, Brad?
Where we're talking, Egypt is like no other. But also the temples around Angkor in Cambodia.
Okay.
I would assume you've been up there.
I've actually never been there. No.
Oh, wow.
That's another site on my list.
I have been to Burma to see all the temples in Myanmar. That's certainly high on my bucket list. Every time I get to Southeast Asia, there's some kind of internal strife.
Yep.
Something going on to make it hard to go in there. But you got in there, you said.
I went there through my international school, because we competed against the school in Rangoon, which is now Yangon, or vice versa. But yeah, I was part of the school association that we were part of. It was called SISA, South Asian International School Association. And so every year we would host somewhere in South Asia, one of the schools would host basketball, soccer, volleyball, field hockey, art, drama, culture, band. And so we would all, pay the money and then go and get housed by a family there. And all the schools in South Asia would come to this area and compete or have a cultural experience together. And so for me, it was like I was all over Pakistan. Pakistan was interesting because I got to go to Taxila, and we traveled up into Kashmir, into Gilgit. Those beautiful areas. And then, across the border at Peshawar into Afghanistan. Like this whole area is just unbelievably beautiful. It's all the upper Indus Valley. Taxila is the last place that Alexander the Great went before he got sick and started dying. But it's like, wow.
Oh, so really? Which place is that?
It's called Taxila. It's in Pakistan. It's a little bit south of Islamabad. Yeah.
Okay. Did you get a chance to go to Harappa or Mohenjo-daro?
I've never been to these areas. No. I've been to Jaipur. Jaipur was really, really amazing. It's all red sandstone and just beautiful carvings, all the buildings there. Some other spots as well. But yeah, this was all before I even realized what any of this stuff was. And it's funny, when I went to art school, I wanted to be a comic book illustrator. And so I had all my comic book, portfolio, and I got ridiculed. They're like, you lived in South Asia and you're not drawing any of the temples or any of this stuff. And I'm like, do you draw McDonald's when you walk by it? I mean, to me, it was kind of like that.
Yeah, right.
I lived there. It was, I walked by it every day. It didn't have an interest to me until now. Now I'm like, wow, I need to go back and actually, go back through a lot of these places that I grew up around and realize some of the cultural value there, because it's huge. It really is.
Oh man, it's amazing.
So you've seen a lot of the US that I haven't seen as well. So there's a lot of sites in the United States that are just super amazing as well. So what is your favorite site that you've been in the US?
Oh, well, now that I'm out here in Nevada, I'm starting to explore deeper into the fabric. Always been fascinated with the West Coast, California, lived many years. And so just up here after being in the Bay Area for close to 30 years, now out in northwestern Nevada. And we just had a monster winter. So I'm a big skier, got up there and clocked in about 24 ski days this year in 6 different states. Wow. Yeah, I was just on the go. I couldn't resist. There's still snow up there, up on Mount Rose summit. Just seeing a picture here. and it's still melting and giving us a lot of river runoff, and no real fires to speak of this year. So it's been a
nice.
nice summer.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
been nice that there haven't been a lot of fires. I'm here in Portland, Oregon, and I try and get up to Hood every year. And during the summer, they do what they call the Endless Mile, and so you can get on the gondola and go up to the upper shack and then hike back down. And there's not a lot of snow, obviously, this time of year, but I mean, it's so beautiful up there. I mean, the view from Mount Hood, you can see literally all the way down to California, all the different mountain ranges, and they're all volcanic, and so it's super beautiful up there. It'd be nice to go up and ski one of these things. Do you do cross country or mostly downhill?
Oh, I do, but mostly downhill is where I get my season pass.
Nice. Wow. Beautiful.
Yeah.
One of these days. Well,
See
yeah.
and ski.
Anything else of interest?
Yeah, just really cool talking with you. I finally got a chance to set up this interview. Well, I guess people want to find out more about my books. These are the ones I've written in CCC Publishing, and then I published a bunch of authors. There's a collection, including Michael Jacob's brand new book. It's not even available on Amazon. You can pre-order it, but we got the advanced copies. And I helped him put this together with all the Awakening of a Warrior by Michael Jaco.
Yeah, right on.
It's a really cool book. He has crystal clarity on his past life recalls, and oftentimes it is in a period of really interesting historical moments, and he gives a perspective of what it was like to be there and be a part of it. So when I read it, I told him, this is such a great book. We got to get it reprinted in a second edition, which needed some TLC and some more editing. And I added the maps and the images and wrote the captions that he all approved. And we were just on yesterday with Michael Jaco, and he really liked the book. So I was happy to hear that it came out well. And we also did his Intuitive Warrior. That's Michael Jaco on the cover. Wow. And that's a real cool book. So the two are in a series, and he's contracted to do 3 and 4. But it's kind of nice. Fits,
so are you publishing this yourself?
I publish these books, yeah.
Oh, wow. All right.
Well, I have a publishing business and a distributor in Chicago where I grew up that I've been with since the 90s. And had I not been with IPG, I'd have been out of publishing a long, long time ago, because they really are my partners. And because I'm from Chicago and I was just out there a couple of weeks ago seeing my family, I can shoot down there and move books around. I've got a long-term storage spot too. So it's really convenient that it's Chicago is the hub for me.
Great.
So,
wow. Yeah, I'd love to help you out with some of your books sometime.
Places. Yeah. But how are you doing your book?
Great. I mean, I literally just got it yesterday.
Up on Kindle?
So
nice.
I haven't advertised it anywhere. I did a first publication run of about 28 books that I'm taking to this event we're going to in Las Vegas from September 13th to the 17th, Alien event. So I'm gonna have a couple of copies on hand.
Oh yeah, I'll see you there.
I discovered Lulu through Walter Bosley and Joseph Patrick Farrell. They do a lot of their book stuff through them, and had a good conversation with Walter about some of his books he does ISBN work on, some of them he doesn't. And so my first run, I just decided I'm just going to self-publish it, put it out there, put a link on my site.
Smart.
And then eventually get it. I was talking with David Said about this, eventually get it onto Amazon and start pushing it out there. But I'm super excited. It's been about a year in the wake, in the workings. But it's about 25 years of my life. So
yeah,
super fast.
No, that's good. I'm glad you put it together.
It jumps through a lot of topics. As I say in the last pages, it's a soft version of my research. There's a lot of subtopics that I could go off on. We've just discussed so many that we could chat for hours about these things. There's so many things going on in the world right now that a lot of people just don't have access to. And I kind of feel like, part of my mission is to help bring people access to some of these adventures. And for me, a lot of it was, again, watching History Channel shows and going, wow, I would love to go to some of these sites And then obviously going to them, it's like, oh my God, here we are. But in the age of the internet, everybody can do their own armchair research. But as I always say, from Indiana Jones, get out of the library, get out into the field. And I think that's where the magic happens, because you meet people. Oftentimes you're like, oh, I can't do this, but that's limited. It's a limited mind belief. Of course you can do it. Just set your mind to it, manifest it, and you can get out into the field and actually go to a lot of the places that Brad and I have actually gone to. And so this is really awesome. I appreciate this conversation.
Yeah, and we're both going to be live at the Alien event in Las Vegas in 6 weeks. So get to hang out face to face there. It's a good event. I'm going to be giving a couple of presentations, and I think I'm moderating 2 panels and sitting on a couple more.
Awesome.
So we'll have to get you up on one of the panel.
I asked David to do that. That would be amazing. Seriously amazing, because this is my first speaking event like this, so I'm super excited to do this. So anything new that you're going to be discussing, or keep that under wraps?
Talking about Antarctica, of course, doing some my new talk is on the builder race and all the polygonal and megalithic architecture around the world. Much of what we talked about here tonight, getting that out there. And yeah, just looking forward to seeing everybody and getting back in the conference swing of things. Usually summers go a little quiet, same with the winters, but spring and fall, it starts ramping up, and
Agreed.
I'll have another one up in Mount Shasta right after that.
Yeah, it was nice to get out to some of these events this year. How can people find you?
Yeah, so CCC Publishing, if you're interested in the books, 3C's Publishing, one word.com, or you can find out my conference schedule and other projects I'm involved with at bradolsen.com.
Great.
Those are the 2 best ways. And then I got a YouTube channel, but haven't been posting on it because I'm worried about getting more strikes and losing it, because I haven't quite backed up all the videos yet.
There's a lot of censorship going on for sure.
Yeah, so I'm just kind of laying low and doing interviews with other people, but we kept it pretty clean. I don't think you'll be in trouble if you post this one up.
No, I think so as well. And you can find me at Giza Direct on YouTube. And I also have my megamist.com, which stands for Megalithic Mysteries, shortened. And that kind of explains a lot of my travels and some of the interviews I've done with Johnny Enoch, Jay Widener, and others. And obviously this will be up there as well. And so, yeah, Brad, I really appreciate your time, and let's do this again and do a post-op after Alien event. That would be amazing.
Yeah, you bet, Hans. It was really great talking to you too. And we'll do a follow-up after Alien event, and maybe we can do it a week or 2 after, give sort of a recap of some of the highlights and best things we learned.
Excellent.
Because I always look at it. It's kind of like you go to these conferences 2, 3, sometimes 4 days, go to a bunch of talks. It's like binge watching on YouTube, all the best content. But the good thing is you get to meet the speakers many times, and a lot of other cool people too.
And the energy is always overwhelming, for sure. Yeah. Contact was really overwhelming, as was Conscious Life Expo. There were just too much experience, too many things to look at, and really amazing times. So I hopefully a lot of people watching this can get out to some of these conferences and come meet us in the flesh. Yeah, for sure.
Looking forward to it.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate your time. Appreciate your time, Brad. And we'll close it out here.
All right. Great talking to you, and pick it up again sometime.
Likewise.